Welcome into Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. Day 9 of training camp, and it is it's one of those times where, again, there's just been so much going on, and yet also we still feel so far from a preseason game. These are those days of camp where
we're a week away.
We're a week away, though, so that's exciting. A week away from the game and trying to start learning some more things about this team and see, especially after several days in pads now, getting a little bit more clarification on things. Also, of course, there's been a few injuries, which we've also been able to get a little bit of clarification about. I know that we had talked a lot about Yaya in yesterday's show, and that we were very happy to hear that it didn't seem as bad as we had, originally thought maybe. And I know Coach Bowles spoke to the issue after practice and gave even more clarity.
Yeah, we were going with reports before that said 4 to 6 weeks because that's what a high ankle sprain, the prognosis generally is. Coach Bowles really put it a little more specifically. He said he would be ready for week 1, which is what everybody wants to hear, right? I mean, it's not the end of the world if Yaya doesn't play in the preseason games, but because he's kind of a one-of-one type of player on our roster, we don't really have another guy like him. Missing him for any extended time would have been troublesome. And I know we already had good news the last couple of days, but hearing Coach Bowles say yesterday after our show, hearing him say he's going to be ready for week 1, he didn't say he might be ready. Now, things can change. With injuries, you just never know, so don't hold us to it. But at least the coaching staff feels like they're going to have him when the season starts.
And then I know that Coach Bowles also talked about, the things that a lot of times coaches look for, the mental errors, the focus, the energy. Those are some of the big things you can tell with or without pads, and that's one of the big things you look for. So I know he spoke to that a little bit as well after practice. What did he say his thoughts were on that?
So we're in our third 3-day set of camp, right? It's 3 on, 1 off. Isn't this this is the third one, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so Thursday was the first day, and he said the team wasn't very energetic that day, but they were very focused, didn't make a lot of errors. And then yesterday, probably after they got yelled at for not being energetic, they came out with a lot of energy, but they made a lot of mistakes, like some botched snap exchanges, things like that. And so you got no energy but focused, and then lots of energy but not focused on Friday.
So today's the day.
The goal is to be energetic and focused and cut down on the Emmys, which is what they call mental errors. Cut down on the Emmys and go into the next break, which they're going to have 2 days off. Go into the next break, feeling good about your progress.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know something else Coach Bowles harps on a lot with his defense is interceptions. And he also is known to be a trash talker, known to give the DBs a little bit of grief.
Especially Jamel.
Poor
so Jamel.
They have just the funniest relationship to me that I think Jamel takes more heat from Coach Bowles than anyone else, and I think it's because he loves it. He takes it. He can dish it back. And one of my favorite moments on the Bucs cruise last year was when Jamel did his Todd Bowles impersonation.
He's pretty good at it.
He's very good at it. It's delightful. But interceptions are always a DB's goal, and then it's a huge indicator. I mean, it can swing a game. It's just a massive impact on the game. And I know Jamel was able to get another one that it looks like he's off to a pretty decent start in that area.
He had 2 picks in like a 4 practice span. That's pretty good. And the point being, there were 2 opportunities for picks, and he made both of them. And he said that last year he dropped 5 potential interceptions. And he made a very good point. He said, that's the difference between being voted All-Pro or Pro Bowl and not. Interceptions is what gets you those awards when you're a defensive back. You could be a great DB, unless you're Darrelle Revis and everybody knows that nobody will throw at you. If you don't have the interceptions, you're probably not getting those awards. And Jamel is one of the better cornerbacks in the league. He's fast, he's athletic, he's big, he's long, he's got everything you want in a corner. But I don't think he's had a Pro Bowl yet, and I know he would like to. So what it's going to take is him catching those balls, and he's caught them. So.
Yeah, that's very true. And then also I know we've been excited to talk about Bucky Irving, that this is one of those guys that I feel like Jalen McMillan is the rookie that's gotten the most attention so far. But I also think that next to him, and of course Graham Barton, we know that's hopefully going to be a huge part of the offense, but a little less flashy in training camp to be able to talk about. Bucky Irving is another guy that I think people are really high on and think could have a big impact on this team, both maybe in special teams and as a running back.
Yeah.
And what are some of the ways that you've already seen him making some plays?
Yeah, Bucky, it's hard to tell running plays. We're going to talk about that a little bit more at some point. It's kind of hard to tell how good the running game is in practice because they don't tackle, right? They thud a little bit, but every run looks like a breakaway. So, you're like, is it really good? Do you really know? But I think you can tell with the running backs when they're releasing out of the backfield and catching passes. And to me, untrained, not a scout, to me, he's looked really good catching passes out of the backfield, kind of on those flat routes when you come out of the backfield and go towards the sideline, catch the ball, as you're turn it up the sideline. I've seen him do that multiple times, and he just seems really natural, both catching the ball away from his body with his hands, and then that quick turn and acceleration up the sideline. I really think he could be a weapon in the pass game.
And we know that the running backs are going to be asked to do a lot, whether it's the pass game like that or the emphasis on the run game. And one of the biggest indicators of how they're going to do is what this offensive line is going to look like. We know that's been a big priority of just knowing that even when Rashad was getting a lot of carries, they were not necessarily for a large, average yards per run. And so looking at this offensive line, and especially the interior of it, knowing how important that is going to be to set guys up for success. And I know, of course, we saw Sua Opeta go down. That had an impact on who's going to be starting at that left guard position. So, Ben Bredeson was already getting a lot of those starting reps. And what do you feel like you're seeing of how much is that maybe his job to lose, or how much is maybe Robert Hainsey still in the mix? And what are we learning about Ben Bredeson and why coaches may be liking him for that spot?
I think it's pretty clear that it's, as you said, it's Ben's job to lose the left guard. He has really, even before the unfortunate injury to Sua Opeta, he was taking the large majority of first-team snaps. And then Todd Bowles said about him that he's been a great surprise in training camp. That was his quote. Now, because of how well he has played at that position. Now, they signed him with the very clear idea that he might be the starter. He was definitely going to be in the competition with Sua, maybe Elijah Klein, the rookie, maybe Robert Hainsey. But I guess the surprise is how much he's grabbed that spot. So I don't think there's a whole lot of mystery anymore that Ben, barring some unforeseen developments, is probably going to be your starting left guard. And the coaches love what he's doing in camp. Now, you talked about the running game. I liked his quotes. I get the impression that he's kind of a really smart guy. Did you see his?
Yeah, so we talked about this a few shows ago, but I found out in doing some research that, to say he's kind of a smart guy is putting it mildly, that he thinks he has a photographic memory. They've never gotten it tested, I don't think, but he taught himself to read at like 3, could already do multiplication.
You didn't?
Maybe I did. I don't recall. I don't think I was doing anything at 3. And then 5 years old, could do multiplication tables. And then I think when he was in 6th grade, took the ACT and did better than 75% of people taking the ACT.
I do remember you telling that
story.
So
he's
there's camp for you. I forgot you told that story already.
Yeah, it's all right. That's the thing. It's like we said, it's day 9, which it's like dog years. We're really.
But somebody's watching now that didn't watch that one.
There you go. So now everybody remembers.
So anyway,
I don't think the playbook's going to be too bad for him.
So anyway, listen to him talk. It was obviously a very cogent press conference, and he said he really is intrigued by this running game, and he's like, I know that sounds like a cliche, but I really mean it. It's not a company line. It's my personal feelings about it. And Coach Liam Cohen, new OC, said that the run game is going to be a lot more varied. It's not just going to be mid-zone or wide zone or duo. It's going to be all of it. And Ben was like, we are doing a lot. We have so many ways to attack. We have so many different types of runs. We hit the edges. We have some plays that look like they're going this way and then they go the other way. And the athleticism of the offensive line is what's making that work.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with 2 more segments here. Lots more to get to from the last couple days of practice. We'll be right back.
Here we go. Hey, it's another day of football, man. Let's have fun. Let's compete. Let's fly around, man.
Because I'm trying to get to
Here we go, baby. Guys are competing. Everybody's just out there practicing to get better and having fun. So that's something that I love to see.
Here, man, let's keep grinding. Smarter team is a better team. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Welcome back to Training Camp Report, presented by Advent Health. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. We're continuing on with some of our takeaways from the last couple days of practice and also from the first game that happened. The Hall of Fame game was our first look at these new kickoff rules, which I know has been one of the big storylines of the offseason of it's just not that often you get a rule change that so dramatically affects the way the game looks and potential plays. Change who might make the team because of it. It's just a fascinating thing. So I know Coach Bowles talked about some of his initial thoughts on these new rules the other night. Did you get any clarification on that?
Yeah, well, this was it was on Tuesday night, so it was before that Hall of Fame game. But that was the night practice indoors, and they did some of the kickoff return stuff. And notably, Bucky Irving appeared to break one. I mean, you never know in a
since
practice,
they're not
but,
fully tackling. Yeah.
You know, they're all saying if the way this is almost like a line of scrimmage play, if you can break through, you might be gone.
Yeah.
Now, I asked Coach if you found something, if you had a design for the return that you thought was going to be good, that could hit one, would you use it in preseason? Do you want to put it on tape? Because what else do the Washington Commanders have to look at when they're preparing for us in week 1? There's no tape from previous seasons on this type of kickoff return. But he said, we have to try. We have to see if it works.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It may have just been the company line. The Hall of Fame game, there were, I think, like 11 kickoff returns, 10, something like that. And there was nothing really particularly, eye-catching. Nobody broke one. I think the longest one went out to like the 31. It's just one game, so it doesn't mean anything.
And like you said, preseason, where maybe they're holding things back.
I wonder if they were holding things back. But it is. I've seen a lot of Bucky Irving. I think he's really probably the leading guy in terms of who's going to be our main kickoff return. Of course, there's going to be 2 guys back there, so it could be him and Sean Tucker or something like that.
I know that whenever it comes to training camp, of course, we're watching everything on the field in terms of the battles and the who's going to get this job and a lot of the X's and O's and all of that kind of thing. But something else that I think is always interesting is to try to gauge culture, to try to gauge the vibes of training camp. And of course, that's a lot more subjective and harder to kind of diagnose than some of the X's and O's of it. But personally, it's just felt so good out here. Everybody feels like they're really tight-knit. Everybody feels like they're happy to be here, like they're confident in this team. And I think that some of the players and coaches have been asked about that and addressed that as well. And does it seem like they're agreeing with some of the outside sentiment that it feels that way?
Are you saying the vibes are good?
The vibes are good.
So,
the vibes are good out here.
Lots of times when you talk about how a team like builds a culture in the locker room and they're so tight-knit and there's good chemistry, it's because they had success, right? You're like, when you're doing well and the plans that the coaches tell you are working, then that builds chemistry. So you're like, well, it's August, how could they possibly know? But this is a team that has been to the playoffs 4 straight years, won a Super Bowl, won 3 straight division titles, and the team architects are keeping that team together. So when guys like Tristan Wirfs get a new deal, and Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield and Levante David, and they're keeping them all together, and that helps. So it's reasonable that in August that this team has a well-built culture, a very tight-knit culture, and that is what everybody's talking about. Coach Bowles said it first. He says he thinks it's the best culture. He's been around since he got here, and then Levante has been here longer than Todd Bowles. He's in his 13th training camp. He's seen a lot. And he agreed. He said, I agree. This is like the most tight-knit culture team that I've been on here. And that's saying a lot for Levante.
And it matters. I am a firm believer that will affect the on-field play as well. That I think
So
some
does
people
Levante.
Might poo-poo that and say like, oh, it doesn't. Like, no, I think that really does matter when it comes down to it in a long season and, fighting for your brothers out there.
They're fighting for each other.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And, when it comes to culture, somebody that I think seems to be having an influence on it is KJ Britt. First of all, this dude talks so much. So much talking. And I always think it's interesting when you have a guy like that to see the response of the team. Because just because you're talking doesn't always mean people are listening. But it feels like KJ Britt, people listen, and that it's not a new thing even for him just because he now is looking at maybe being the starter there. Like, this is the thing he's been doing. This is just true to his character.
I think there's guys who trash talk and it's annoying, and there's guys who trash talk and everybody loves it.
It's endearing.
Yes. And so KJ's starting now, and he's on the field a lot. And so it's like more people around the team are noticing, man, that guy talks a lot. But Levante's like, he's been doing that since day one. I mean, even when he wasn't starting, he's always talking. He's always talking. He said Carlton Davis, when we drafted him, because Carlton Davis and him played at Auburn together, he said when they drafted KJ, Carlton's like, be ready, because this guy is never going to stop talking. So it's the endearing type of trash talk that you were talking about. I think it's kind of almost part of his leadership, and I think everybody's enjoying it.
That's interesting. Well, we talked about kind of the schedule, that there's going to be a couple days off after this practice, and I know, like you said, we're a week away from the next game. So in terms of schedule-wise, what are we looking at moving ahead? And then also, I know a depth chart theoretically should be coming soon.
So it's kind of unusual. I don't remember having basically 2 days off.
I was
in a
thinking
row.
the same thing. I was even confused looking at the schedule, like, is this right?
I kept looking at it like, I'm
Yeah.
reading this wrong. They do have a walkthrough tomorrow, but they don't have an actual practice. So in terms of, stressing their bodies, the players, and then Monday they have the day off. So they have basically 2 straight days off. And I guess this is something Todd Bowles has decided to do in terms of what we were talking about a couple shows ago, where he's trying to have the best schedule that keeps your players healthy and ready to go, and the goal is to be good in week 1 of the season, right? So, I'm sure the players love it. A couple days off is nice. And then, yes, next week is our first game week, and you are required. Let me say this. Coaches do not want to publish a depth chart right now. I know they've got one.
Yeah.
They've got a file. Some of them have it up on a screen in their rooms. They've got a file, but they don't want to put a depth chart out because mainly they want to keep up the true idea that there's still a lot of competition going on, and somebody that's listed number 1 right now might not be 3 weeks from now, but they're required to this coming week because you have to put it out so they can put it on the flip cards for the media for the next game. So probably Monday or Tuesday we're going to see our first depth chart, and while it is still an ongoing thing and a document that constantly changes, it's still going to be interesting to see who they put first at some positions.
All right, we are going to take one more break. We'll be back the way we have been the last few days, breaking down a different position group each day to see who might make the team, who might be the starters. So we'll be back in a minute.
Must be something in the water out here. I don't know what it is.
This year will be better. It's already showing.
Yeah, we got some guys.
OTAs, it was different. We know Baker's going to be the guy.
The progression from last year to this year, you could see it.
The more we compete against each other, the better off we'll be when the season starts.
Every single room should have competition going on.
Won't get us a day.
Disturbing the peace, let me out, but at least, man, I'm going OD and I came for the feast. I'm too elite, better give me my face, till I'm coming in hot, so we bringing the heat. What do you mean? I got a team. No, you are out of my league. 100 degrees, feel like a breeze. I am not hit to a keys. I know that city still got my back. Can't nobody else shut it down like that. Spell my name, better use all caps. Been running this thing and I can't hold back.
Welcome back into Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. We are going to be breaking down the wide receivers today. This is a group that is, as we started to do, we both went, man, there's a lot of them on this roster. So, Mike, Chris, we're
Let's
good.
just skip it.
We're going to skip them because we know who they are. We know what they do. Let's get into some
We
of the
didn't even
weeds
say
of
their last names.
That's
Everybody
exactly.
knows
They
who
don't
they
need
are.
it. They're like Madonna.
They are, by the way, the number 1 and 2 receivers in team history.
Yeah, so there you
In
go.
every category.
There's our 1 and 2 receivers in team history. So let's talk about these other guys that are trying to break in there. We know that the 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 spots are still kind of up for grabs. So what are you noticing at this point of where you think that stands?
Well, we've talked about him a lot, Jalen McMillan. He's really been one of the stars of training camp and everything you want to see from him. So that's been exciting. And he can operate outside or in the slot. So I think the Bucs are really satisfied with maybe he's your primary third receiver, but if he's not, maybe Trey Palmer stays with that job. You still feel like you got a guy that you can plug in any of the 3 positions and be good. So that's been good. Trey Palmer, obviously, I don't think there's anything. It's not like he's gotten worse from last year, and they really liked what he did. I think he had what is it, like 33 catches, 36 catches, 3 touchdowns. But even beyond the numbers, there were times last year when his speed kind of changed the gravity on the field and pulled defenders away to make things easier for Mike and Chris. So those 2 guys are probably your primary competitors for. And when I say primary competitors for the third receiver job, I'm talking primary third receiver. But if we run the amount of 11 personnel, which is 3 receivers, that Liam Cohen's teams did in Los Angeles, then that third receiver is basically a starting job, and you're going to spell those guys. So the 4th receiver is probably going to play quite a bit as well. So you could say Mike, Chris, Jalen, and Trey are probably going to play a lot, all of them.
Okay, and then so now who are some of these other guys that have a chance to make the roster, make an impact? I know, Rakim Jarrett was on the team last year. They seem to be pretty high on him. And then you also signed Sterling Shepard this offseason, who's a known name, but, has been around for quite a while at this point.
Yeah, Rock really impressed him last year in training camp and then got some playing time early on. He suffered an injury about mid-season and didn't play a lot in the second half, but I know they're very high on him, so I would think he's a primary competitor for one of those last receiver spots. And then Sterling Shepard, basically the last guy signed to the roster before training camp, and I think that was because beyond Mike and Chris, this is a really young and inexperienced group, so it's nice to have another veteran presence in there. Think of it like David Moore now last year. Now, Sterling Shepard is a more accomplished receiver in terms of his career numbers than David Moore was, but David Moore was a really nice veteran addition who made a lot of plays down the stretch. Sterling Shepard, same thing. He's got, 370 career catches, something like that, and he's looked pretty good out here. I know when we did the one-on-ones the other day, I thought he was excellent, so that's a guy that could bring maybe that veteran influence to the thing if he makes the team.
Yeah, and then I know there's Ryan Miller, Raleigh Webb, Cephas Johnson. These were all guys that were kind of with the team
Right.
a little bit
Mostly
last year,
practice
practice squad guys. And then you got a new addition with Cody Thompson. He did play a little bit with the Seahawks this last year. And we brought up Cameron Johnson, that he seems to be a guy that some people have noticed flash in camp a little bit.
Yeah, Webb has had some regular season action with the Ravens and the Patriots, I think. So he's seen the field. Cody, you were talking. If this was, I cut. Start again. I can't talk all of a sudden. Cameron Johnson, undrafted free agent that was really gaining a lot of buzz. Even some of the defenders that came to the podium here were talking about when they're asked who's impressing you, they're like, number 9. They didn't always even necessarily remember his name.
Yeah.
It's like, number 9, he's looked really good.
Yeah.
He's actually dealing with a ribs injury right now, but it's nothing serious. But that's obviously maybe slowed down his momentum just a little bit. And then you got a couple other undrafted guys, Latrell Jones from Southern Miss and Tanner Canoe from Eastern Michigan. And we don't know a lot about these guys, but it's a pretty common thing nowadays with the 16-man practice squad for some of these undrafted rookies to make the practice squad, just like, Raleigh Webb did or Cephas Johnson. And then they get a chance maybe next year to take another step. So we'll see how those guys can go.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Again, the guys have the next 2 days off from true training camp practice, so our next show will not be until Tuesday morning, but make sure you come back then.